When did a found receipt force you to shatter someone's fantasy? There are moments in life, when you stand at a crossroads, and it's not just two paths stretching out before you, but a tangled web of loyalty and deceit, each strand pulling you closer to a revelation you desperately wish you could unsee. I found myself in one of those moments last week, clutching a crumpled receipt in my hand, staring at the perfectly pressed wedding invitation for the captain of the city's beloved basketball team, knowing that what I held wasn't just proof of a simple transaction, but the key to blowing up a carefully constructed fantasy, maybe even a career. And the worst part, I was the one who put it all together. My name is Jean Kim, and at 43, I thought I'd seen it all. I run a modest event planning business, mostly corporate functions and the occasional milestone birthday. But this wedding, this was supposed to be my big break. Our city, you see, lives and breathes for the Strikers, our NBA team, and when their charismatic captain, Marcus Thorne, announced his engagement to a local socialite, the buzz was deafening. Every vendor in town practically clawed for a piece of the action, and somehow I landed the main event. It was a massive undertaking, requiring late nights, early mornings, and navigating an ocean of opinions, not least from Marcus' future father-in-law, Jeffrey Coleman, 53M, a man whose default setting was difficult and whose secondary setting was actively infuriating. Jeffrey wasn't just difficult, he was a human obstacle course. Every decision, from the shade of ivory napkins to the exact blend of imported coffee beans, had to pass through his personal gauntlet of disdain. Dissect every invoice, question every recommendation, and then, invariably, tell me how his daughter Clara deserved nothing less than perfection, usually delivered with a condescending pat on my shoulder that felt more like a mild assault. "Jean," he'd boom, his voice echoing in the grand ballroom wed booked, "are you certain this floral arrangement adequately conveys the gravitas of this union? Clara isn't just marrying anyone As if I hadn't heard that every day for the past 6 months. My office, if you could call it that, was a cozy disaster zone in the spare room of my little house, perpetually littered with fabric swatches, catering menus, and open laptops. It wasn't uncommon for my nosy neighbor, Alan Griffin, 26M, to pop his head over our shared fence, a smirk plastered on his perpetually amused face. Alan was technically a freelance graphic designer, but I suspected his true calling was neighborhood surveillance. He was always just grabbing the mail or watering his petunias right when I was on an important call, his ears practically swiveling. "Another celebrity wedding, Jean?" he'd tease, his eyes twinkling. "Heard Marcus Thorne loves a good argument about napkin folds. You're a glutton for punishment, aren't you?" I'd just sigh and wave him off, but deep down, his lighthearted banter was a small, welcome break from Jeffrey's relentless scrutiny. The Strikers' season had just wrapped, a nail-biting finish that left them just short of the finals. The entire city was still reeling, a mix of pride and disappointment hanging in the air like a stubborn fog. Wedding, therefore, was shaping up to be more than just a celebration. It was a distraction, a rallying point, a chance for the team and their fans to let loose and forget the sting of defeat. Marcus, usually so stoic and focused on the court, was surprisingly involved in the wedding details, or at least in giving his fiancée, Clara, whatever she wanted. He seemed genuinely smitten, which made the whole thing feel a bit more personal for me, even beyond the professional aspirations. One of my biggest challenges, aside from Jeffrey, was navigating the team dynamics. Marcus had been very specific. No team drama, no old feuds, just pure celebration. But anyone who spent 5 minutes around a professional sports team knows that's like asking water not to be wet. There were whispers, undercurrents, especially concerning Jose Turner, 64M, a former Strikers coach, now a bitter ex-friend to several of the veteran players, including Marcus himself. Jose had been unceremoniously let go a few years back, replaced by a younger, more aggressive coach, and he hadn't taken it well. He'd occasionally pop up in local sports talk radio segments, spewing thinly veiled criticisms of the team's current strategy and, by extension, Marcus' leadership. Marcus, however, insisted he be invited. "It's about letting go, Jean," he told me, his voice firm. "We're all moving on." Just nodded, making a mental note to seat Jose as far away from the active roster as humanly possible. Then there was Judy Bryant, 29F. Judy was the Strikers' quiet, almost invisible physical therapist. She moved like a shadow, always at the edge of the team's boisterous energy, observing, tending to injuries, rarely engaging in conversation. She was often seen hunched over a laptop in the corner of the training room, poring over medical charts or something equally obscure. Players, from what I gathered, found her a bit odd, a loner. Some even whispered about her intense focus and lack of social skills. I'd tried to engage her a few times during my visits to the team facility, discussing dietary requirements for the reception or the accessibility needs for a player with a lingering knee issue. She was polite, concise, but always seemed eager to retreat into her own world. It struck me as a bit sad, really. She clearly loved her work, but the isolation seemed heavy on her. Marcus, though, always treated her with a quiet respect, a nod, a brief word of thanks. It made me wonder if he saw something in her that others missed. The closer we got to the wedding date, the more frantic things became. Jeffrey was now micromanaging the micromanagement. Every morning, a fresh email from him would land in my inbox, usually before my first cup of coffee, questioning my sleep schedule and implicitly my dedication. "Jean, just checking if the antique candelabras have been personally inspected for tarnish. Clara expects brilliance." I'd grit my teeth, mentally counting to 10, and reply with the professional equivalent of "Yes, sir, I've licked every one of them clean." On a particularly hectic afternoon, I was at the team's practice facility, finalizing menu details with the catering manager. The air thrummed with the familiar scent of liniment and sweat. Marcus was on the court, going through a light shoot-around with a few teammates, his movements fluid and powerful. He truly was a remarkable athlete, and I could see why the city adored him. As I was packing up my notes, I overheard a snippet of conversation from the coach's office nearby. It was Jose Turner's voice, unmistakable, sharp with that old bitterness. He was talking to someone I couldn't identify, but the words betrayal and always knew he was capable pricked my ears. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but it was impossible not to. I just shrugged it off as Jose being Jose, stirring up old grievances. The man had a permanent chip on his shoulder the size of a basketball. Later that week, I had a meeting scheduled with Jeffrey to go over the final seating chart. Had, of course, made countless last-minute changes, forcing me to rearrange entire tables. My head was throbbing. As I was leaving my house, Alan, true to form, was watering his petunias, his eyes already on me. "Big meeting with the future father-in-law?" he asked, wiping sweat from his brow. "Heard he's a real charmer. My sister's friend tried to do his daughter's sweet 16 party, said it nearly drove her to interpretive dance." I actually snorted a laugh. "Interpretive dance sounds like a relaxing alternative right now, Alan," I admitted. "Wish me luck." He gave me a sympathetic thumbs up. The meeting with Jeffrey was, predictably, a nightmare. He picked apart every single detail, even the placement of the salt shakers. "Jean, these are designer salt shakers. They require a prominence." I nodded, feeling my eye twitch. He kept a meticulous binder, full of printouts and marked-up documents. At one point, while he was haranguing me about the specific shade of gold on the menu cards, he excused himself for a phone call, leaving the binder open on his polished mahogany desk. My eyes naturally drifted. It was a page with a diagram of the head table. I glanced at it, just making sure my notes matched his latest decree. Then, a small detail caught my eye, a handwritten note scrawled at the bottom in Jeffrey's distinctive, aggressive hand. "Judy Bryant, do not seat near Marcus. Keep her far away. Problematic." My stomach gave a little lurch. Judy? Problematic. What could the quiet physical therapist possibly have done to warrant such a vehement exclusion, especially from Jeffrey, who barely acknowledged anyone outside his immediate circle? It felt out of place, a discordant note in the symphony of wedding planning. I quickly averted my gaze as Jeffrey re-entered the room, picking up our argument about the font choice. I tried to dismiss it, telling myself it was just Jeffrey being Jeffrey, overreacting to some minor perceived slight. But the image of the note, and his intense tone, stuck with me. The next few days were a blur of vendor calls, linen checks, and trying to track down a rare artisanal honey for the dessert bar, which Clara had suddenly decided was non-negotiable. I barely had time to sleep, let alone ruminate on Jeffrey's strange note about Judy. I saw Alan a few times, always with a knowing look. "You're looking a little green, Jean," he observed one morning as I trudged to my car, coffee in hand. "Jeffrey still making your life a living hell?" I just managed a weak smile. "Something like that. This wedding is going to kill me." Then came the delivery of the wedding favors. I had outsourced them to a small, bespoke gift company, were miniature basketballs, elegantly inscribed with Marcus and Clara's initials and filled with gourmet chocolates. The last box arrived late one evening, dropped off by a tired courier. I was too exhausted to do more than sign for it and drag it inside. The following morning, I finally had a few hours of relative calm before the final walkthrough at the venue. I decided to unpack the last box of favors and arrange them. As I pulled out the tissue paper, something fell onto my rug. It was a small, cream-colored receipt folded into a tight square. I unfolded it, thinking it was just a packing slip that had slipped out, but it wasn't. It was a receipt for a luxury watch, an extremely expensive limited edition timepiece dated 2 months prior. The amount on it made my jaw drop. What really caught my eye, though, was the name of the purchaser. It wasn't Marcus. It was Clara's name, plain as day. And the shipping address wasn't hers or even Marcus's. It was an address I recognized from team documents I'd handled, an address listed as the official residence of the Strikers' star point guard, Marcus' best friend and longtime teammate, David Deacon Jones. My mind started racing, trying to make sense of it. A gift, maybe? A very asterisk expensive gift from Clara to Deacon? It seemed odd, given Marcus and Clara's upcoming nuptials. Deacon was Marcus's best man, for crying out loud. Receipt felt like a pebble in my shoe, nagging at me, unsettling. I tried to push it aside. It was probably nothing. A mistake. A wrong address. Maybe a gift for Marcus that was accidentally sent to Deacon's house because Deacon was picking it up. My empathetic nature instantly searched for an innocent explanation, but the unease festered. I remembered Jose Turner's bitter words from the practice facility. Betrayal. Always knew he was capable. I remembered Jeffrey's strange, emphatic note about Judy Bryant. And then I recalled a fleeting image I'd seen a few weeks ago at a team charity event I'd helped coordinate. Marcus had been on stage, giving a speech, and I'd glanced over at Clara in the front row. She wasn't looking at Marcus. She was looking across the room, at Deacon, who was laughing loudly with a group of fans. There had been something in her gaze, a fleeting, almost imperceptible warmth that seemed out of place, or perhaps too intense for just a friend. I'd dismissed it then, caught up in the chaos of the event. But now it clicked back into place, a tiny piece of an unsettling puzzle. I sat there, the expensive receipt crinkled in my trembling fingers, the wedding invitations mocking me from the pile on my desk. Beautiful, elaborate wedding that I had meticulously planned, the culmination of months of my life, suddenly felt like a house of cards teetering on the edge of a cliff. The Strikers' captain, the city's hero, about to marry a woman who might have just bought his best friend an exorbitantly priced watch. And I, Jean Kim, event planner extraordinaire, was holding the proof. What was I supposed to do? Tell Marcus? Confront Clara? Bury it and pretend I never saw it, letting the charade play out? Wedding was just 3 days away. My heart was pounding, a cold dread seeping into my bones. This wasn't just about a wedding anymore. This was about something much darker. My heart was pounding, a cold dread seeping into my bones. This wasn't just about a wedding anymore. This was about something much darker. The receipt, a flimsy rectangle of paper, felt impossibly heavy in my trembling fingers. My mind reeled, sifting through the snippets. Jose's bitter words about betrayal, Jeffrey's cryptic note about Judy, Clara's fleeting gaze at Deacon. They all coalesced into an ugly, undeniable mosaic. The professional planner in me screamed to bury it to pretend. My business, my reputation, hung in the balance. But the human being, the Jean Kim who empathized with strangers on the bus, couldn't. Marcus, for all his fame and success, was a good man. He deserved the truth, however painful. And I, by sheer accident, had stumbled upon it. The wedding was 3 days away. Every second felt like an hour. I shoved the receipt into my pocket, my hands clammy. I needed air, needed to think. My eyes landed on the wedding invitation on my desk, the elegant script now mocking me. Marcus and Clara, a perfect facade. I grabbed my keys, intending to drive to just get away from it all for a few minutes. As I stepped out, Alan was predictably adjusting a rogue rose on his trellis, humming off-key. His head snapped up, his usual smirk faltering as he took in my ashen face. "Whoa, Jean," he said, his voice surprisingly soft. "You look like you've seen a ghost. Did Jeffrey finally try to redecorate your soul?" I almost laughed, a hysterical bubble of air that caught in my throat. I couldn't hold it in. "Worse, Alan," I whispered, my voice raw. "Much, much worse." His brow furrowed, the lightheartedness draining from his face. He saw something in my eyes, something beyond wedding stress. He leaned against the fence, arms crossed, his gaze steady. "Talk to me, Jean. Seriously." My initial instinct was to deflect, to keep my professional distance. But his genuine concern, a rare commodity in my Jeffrey-centric world, broke through. I looked around, then lowered my voice, spilling it out in a torrent of words, the receipt, the address, the lingering suspicions. Left out my fleeting, half-forgotten observation about Clara and Deacon from the charity event, not wanting to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but everything else came tumbling out. Alan listened, not interrupting, his usual playful expression replaced by a look of sober contemplation. When I finished, the silence hung heavy between us. "Deacon Jones," he murmured, almost to himself. "Marcus's best man. Wow, that's quite the bombshell, Jean. What are you going to do?" "Don't know," I admitted, my voice cracking. "I can't let Marcus walk into this. But how do I tell him? What if I'm wrong? What if there's an innocent explanation?" Alan nodded slowly. "There's always that possibility. But a luxury watch for your fiancé's best friend, shipped to his house 2 months before the wedding, that's a pretty specific, innocent explanation to conjure up." He paused, rubbing his chin. "You know, my sister's friend, the one who tried to plan Jeffrey's daughter's sweet 16? She mentioned something once about Jeffrey being incredibly protective of Clara, almost obsessively so. Not just about her image, but about who she spent time with. She said he once made a huge fuss because Clara was seen having coffee with an old high school friend he didn't approve of. He has a very tight grip, it seems." His words, meant to offer context about Jeffrey, inadvertently sent a jolt through me. Jeffrey's note: "Judy Bryant, do not seat near Marcus. Keep her far away. Problematic." Was it possible Jeffrey knew something about Judy, something he was trying to suppress? Was she another person he deemed problematic because of who she was spending time with? The pieces were starting to fit, forming a picture I desperately didn't want to see. "Alan," I said, a new resolve hardening my voice, "I need to talk to someone, not Marcus first. Someone who might know something without betraying trust, someone who might be able to shed light on Jeffrey's strange note about Judy or just everything." I thought of Judy, the quiet loner. And then Jose Turner, the betrayal comment. Jose might be bitter, but he was also connected to the team, to its history, to its undercurrents. He might be the unlikeliest key. Spent the rest of that day trying to find Jose. He wasn't easy to track down, his number unlisted, his usual haunts obscure. Finally, I got a lead from a contact in local sports radio, a small, out-of-the-way dive bar where he occasionally held court. It was late when I found him, hunched over a beer, his face a roadmap of old grievances. He looked up, his eyes narrowing as he recognized me. Well, if it isn't the wedding planner," he sneered, his voice raspy. "To check on my seating arrangement, make sure I'm far enough away from the chosen ones?" "Jose," I said, pulling up a chair uninvited, "I need to talk to you. About Marcus, about Clara, about betrayal." His eyes sharpened, losing their glazed bitterness for a moment. He took a long swig of his beer. "What about it? You said something a few weeks ago at the practice facility. About Marcus, about betrayal." I watched his face carefully. He let out a harsh laugh. "Marcus is a betrayer of himself, but I wasn't talking about him directly. I was talking about the team, about the money, about how loyalty means nothing when there's a bigger contract on the table. And Clara, she's Jeffrey's girl. Jeffrey Coleman values money and control above all else. He'd sell his own soul for the right deal. You think his daughter's any different?" I heard whispers for months, Jean. Whispers about Deacon and Clara, about them being closer than a best man and a bride-to-be should be. Jeffrey tried to shut it down, of course. Threatened anyone who spoke out. He pushed for this wedding hard, a power play, a way to tie the Thorn name, the striker's name, to his own. He wanted that social cachet, that public display of perfection. But love, loyalty, not in Jeffrey Coleman's playbook. My blood ran cold. Whispers, Jeffrey's control, it all aligned. "And Judy Bryant?" I pressed. "Jeffrey has a note saying she's problematic to keep her away from Marcus." Jose scoffed. "Judy, poor kid, is the team physical therapist. She's quiet, observant, she sees everything. She was always patching up Deacon, spending extra time with him. Too much time, some would say. She heard things, saw things. She tried to warn Marcus once subtly. He dismissed it. Thought she was just being her usual awkward self. Jeffrey got wind of it, threatened her job, told her to keep her mouth shut. He didn't want anyone messing up his perfect union. Judy's not problematic, Jean. She's just honest. She cared enough about Marcus to try and warn him, even when it put her job at risk. She's a good kid, just out of her element in that den of vipers." The pieces clicked. Judy wasn't problematic, she was a witness. Jeffrey wasn't just difficult, he was a manipulator, willing to sacrifice others to maintain his manufactured reality. Jose, for all his bitterness, had a dark, cynical truth to offer. I thanked Jose, leaving him with his beer and his grievances. The bar felt oppressive. I knew what I had to do. The wedding was tomorrow. 2 days later, the grand ballroom, once a canvas for my meticulous planning, now felt like a tomb. It was the morning of the wedding. Instead of the joyful chaos of florists and caterers, there was a hushed, devastated stillness. The reception was canceled. The wedding, too, had gone to Marcus early that morning, the receipt clutched in my hand, Judy's silent warning echoing in my ears, and Hosea's words about Jeffrey's machinations solidifying my resolve. I had laid it all out for him, quietly, directly. The receipt, the address, the problematic note about Judy, and what Id learned about her attempts to warn him. Hosea's assessment of Jeffrey's motivations. Marcus, the stoic captain, had listened, his face slowly crumbling. He had immediately confronted Deacon, who, faced with irrefutable evidence, had confessed. Clara, when confronted by Marcus, had broken down, admitting to an affair with Deacon, fueled by a combination of genuine affection for Deacon and a desperate need to escape her father's suffocating control and his arranged marriage. She admitted the watch was a symbol of their secret commitment, a reckless act born of desperation. Jeffrey, when the news broke, had been incandescent with rage, not at his daughter's infidelity, but at the public humiliation at the unraveling of his carefully constructed empire. He screamed, he blustered, he tried to blame me, blame Judy, blame anyone but himself. But the truth, once unleashed, couldn't be contained. Alan, surprisingly, had been a quiet pillar of support. When I called him, my voice shaking, to tell him what had transpired, he simply said, "Do you need anything, Jane? Anything at all?" He even brought over a casserole later that day, not with a smirk, but a genuinely worried expression. He had seen the raw edges of my empathy, the toll it took. He wasn't just a nosy neighbor anymore, he was a friend. He even offered to help me sort through the cancellations, contacting vendors, his graphic design skills surprisingly useful in creating polite, concise statements for the press. His nosiness, it turned out, was fueled by an intense, almost journalistic curiosity about human nature, a curiosity that, when tempered with empathy, could be incredibly kind. He had evolved from a playful observer to an active participant, his character development earned through simply showing up and offering genuine help. Jeffrey Coleman, in the aftermath, was a broken man, stripped of his carefully curated image. His daughter's betrayal, coupled with the public scandal, was a wound his ego couldn't heal. He was no longer the boisterous tyrant, he was a silent, simmering ruin. He tried to sue me for breach of contract, for ruining his daughter's wedding, but my detailed records and the undeniable evidence of the affair, which Clara herself corroborated, left him with no legal standing. His rage turned inward, festering. He lost face, lost influence. His significant character development wasn't a positive transformation, but a humbling, a stripping away of his power, revealing a hollow core. He was left with nothing but his own bitter company, truly walking away from a relationship built on lies, only to find himself isolated. Judy Bryant, the misunderstood loner, found her voice. And Marcus apologized to her, truly listened to her. She finally explained the full extent of Jeffrey's threats, of Clara and Deacon's attempts to hide their affair. She even shared her own struggles with social anxiety, explaining that her quietness wasn't indifference, but a profound shyness that made it difficult to speak up, especially against a powerful man like Jeffrey. Marcus, devastated but grateful for her loyalty, offered her a permanent, expanded role with the team, one that valued her insight and quiet wisdom beyond just physical therapy. She still preferred her solitude, but she was no longer invisible. She had been seen, understood, and her integrity affirmed. She hadn't changed who she was, but her quiet integrity had finally been recognized and appreciated. She had, in her own way, walked away from the burden of silence. A month had passed since. The dust had settled, or at least settled into a different kind of chaos. My business had taken a hit, of course. The Strikers' wedding disaster was front-page news for a week, but surprisingly, the blowback wasn't as severe as I'd feared. Many understood I was caught in the middle. Some even praised my integrity. I had canceled the contracts with minimal fuss, absorbed some of the losses, and focused on smaller, less glamorous events. My little office in the spare room felt different now. Less chaotic, perhaps. The wedding invitations were gone, replaced by invoices for a local Rotary Club luncheon. My life was calmer, certainly, simpler. I was no longer chasing the grand, spectacular event, the big break that had nearly broken me. I found myself appreciating the quiet rhythm of my everyday work, the small victories of a perfectly executed corporate retreat. Experience had been a crucible, burning away my professional ambition, revealing a different kind of strength. I saw Alan over the fence a few days ago. He was pruning his roses, humming. "How's the low-key life, Jean?" he asked, a genuine smile on his face. "No more wrestling with millionaire megalomaniacs over designer salt shakers?" I laughed, a real, unforced laugh. No more, just good, honest work. I had walked away from the glitz, the pressure, the toxic ambition that came with clients like Jeffrey. I had walked away from a potentially lucrative but morally compromising path. It wasn't just about the wedding. It was about defining my own boundaries, my own ethics. Jose Turner, I heard, was still bitter, still holding court in that dive bar, but his rants now had a new target. Jeffrey Coleman, the architect of deceit. He was, in his own warped way, a validation of the truth. His bitterness, it seemed, was fixed. Marcus Thorne, after a brief, much-needed hiatus, was back on the court, playing with a renewed intensity, focused not on a broken engagement, but on the game, on his team. He had faced his personal betrayal with dignity, and while the pain would linger, he had chosen to move forward. He was a survivor. And me? I was still Jean Kim, the emotional empath, but with a thicker skin, a clearer sense of self. The crumpled receipt had led me down a path of darkness, but it had also led me to a brighter understanding of myself, of loyalty, and of the profound peace that comes from walking away from what no longer serves you, even if it means sacrificing a dream. The tangled web of loyalty and deceit had unwound, leaving behind not a perfect picture, but a truthful one. And sometimes, truth, however messy, is the most beautiful resolution of all.